Hi, welcome to Chili's.
Saw 2. So as one might predict, Saw 2 is the sequel to Saw. The first movie was a success, so you know what to do. Start pumping out sequels until we bleed the idea dry. So our main character of this movie is Detective Eric Matthews. No, not that Eric Matthews. This Eric Matthews. Not Mark, Donnie, the new kid on the block himself. So Detective Matthews gets pulled into Jigsaw's world when his son Daniel becomes part of one of Jigsaw's games. In this game, there are 8 people in a house, including Daniel, with traps set all along the house, as well as the house itself being the game. Now, for starters, I really like the premise of this movie, especially for a sequel. Most horror sequels get really lazy with their premises, but not this one. In this one, Detective Matthews is face-to-face with Jigsaw for most of the movie, and he has to figure out what to do to try to save his son. Before we get into this really far, I do want to say the posters for, I think, Saws 1 through 3, I used to see at the video store when I was a kid all the time. Video store, that's an old phrase. And they used to scare the crap out of me. They scare me more than the movies scare me now, so don't be scared of that thumbnail, okay? I guess that's just good marketing, because I thought I'd grow up and watch this movie and it would scare me to death. Okay, so the pros of this movie. The writing is very well done. It's very thought out. It sets up a lot of things. There's nothing that seems incidental throughout the movie. You can tell that when they were writing it, they knew where they were going. Donnie Wahlberg does a very good job. I like him as an actor. He's really good in Band of Brothers for the 5 minutes that he's in The Sixth Sense. He looks like a disheveled mess throughout the whole movie, but he does a good job. The other actors do a good job, they're just not quite as high profile as Donnie Wahlberg. One actor who really steals the show in whatever scene they're in is Tobin Bell, the guy who plays Jigsaw himself. They gave him a lot more screen time in this movie, they gave the character some backstory, and he really does everything he can with it. This is the start of Tobin Bell becoming a horror icon, and yes, I do think his portrayal as Jigsaw has become an icon of horror. I know I said I really liked the traps in the first movie, but I would argue the ones in this one are just as good, if not better. One trap specifically in this movie is probably my favorite of the whole franchise, and I won't spoil what it is, but it makes my skin crawl every time I watch it. And this movie has a really good twist. Not quite as good as the first one, but you're really not ever going to get as good as the first one, no matter how hard you try. It's still pretty good, and they set it up very well, so my hat's off to them. For some of the cons of this movie, the directing and editing sometimes is erratic and all over the place, kind of like it was sometimes in the first movie, which I don't super love, but it feels kind of like just a young director trying to imitate the style of the first one, so I'm not going to fault him too hard on it. And once again, all the cops in the movie really suck at their job. I don't know where they got trained, but they're terrible at it, and they should be fired. The dialogue can also be kind of choppy at points, and it feels like they just drop plot points out of nowhere sometimes, but it moves the plot forward. I'm watching a horror sequel. I'm not going to be worried too much about that. Oh, and one thing I find really funny is how do some people in this universe still not know who Jigsaw is, especially after the events of the last movie? There are people in this one who are like, who's that? Are you kidding me? If you had a serial killer hanging out in your town, you would know, right? Like, come on. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention for the pros is that even though the directing can be kind of wishy-washy sometimes, there were a lot of cool transitions from scene to scene in this movie that I appreciated, and you don't see in a lot of movies, so I was like, hey, good for you. All in all, I think this movie is a little bit weaker than the first, but it's still very strong, especially for a horror sequel. I give it a 7.4 out of 10. It's all fun and games. Really, I wish horror sequels were more like this. Most of them nowadays stink like old cheese. Alright guys, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, tell the people you care about in your life, tell the people you don't care about in your life, tell the disgruntled drive-thru worker at your local Popeyes.
Oh yes, there will be blood.
Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.